Great.
Cool.
This is a Gaetano Pasta, 1705. Hi everyone, I'm back with another violin video, finally, and this one is a Gaetano Pasta violin from 1705. And before we get started, guys, I don't speak Italian. I've never studied Italian, so I'm definitely going to be pronouncing some things wrong, and you're just gonna have to deal with that. So, onwards. The vaults at Cime are just crammed. There are so many instruments in there, we couldn't possibly have the time to look at all of them. But all the same, we wanted to take a look at the instruments that were not of the super famous variety. So Ilya pulled down a Pasta violin from the shelf for me, completely on a whim, completely because it said pasta on it, and that's funny. And I was really shocked because it turned out to be a great instrument. I've never heard of Pasta, but he's got a great name, so he's getting into rotation.
That's if you like pasta.
If you like pasta, which I really do. Ilya not so much, but I really do. So what do we know about Pasta or his instruments? Honestly, not that much. A quick Google search will get you hundreds of small Italian restaurants called Gaetano's serving up the world's best pasta. What we do know is that Pasta lived from 1679 to 1760 and was part of the Brescian School. He was the son of Bartolomeo Pasta, who was also a luthier and worked for Niccolò Amati in Cremona in the 1660s. Gaetano followed in his father's footsteps and likely studied under Giovanni Battista Ruggieri in Cremona, serving as his assistant. Why do I say likely? Because we can't actually prove it. All we know is they were in the same city at the same time at the right ages for Pasta to be working under Ruggieri, and of course there are the similarities in their styles. I'm actually a huge fan of Ruggieri. He's not one of the most popular Cremonese makers, but his work is just gorgeous. It's so beautifully crafted and has such a pure sound. Now Pasta, on the other hand, is not as refined as Ruggieri. The lines are not as elegant. There's not as much attention to detail. You'll see sometimes, for instance, that the purflings on Pasta's instruments will be scratched in rather than inlaid, which really smacks of a bit of a quick job. So whether or not he did actually study with Ruggieri, he did end up establishing a shop with his brother Domenico in Brescia in 1694 under the name of Alla Pallada. This instrument is a 1705, a strong violin with a two-piece back, and like I said before, I was really quite surprised. The sound is round, rich, quite lovely, and surprisingly strong. This is tuned to like 435 or something like that. So we're just gonna keep it nice and Baroque. There is such a lack of information on this luthier. I've reached out to my luthier friends, scoured the internet. When you YouTube, by the way, Gaetano Pasta violin, you get ravioli in a 2-star Michelin restaurant. I went through all my violin books, but I did eventually find on a bunch of auctioneers' website, you usually get something like this. A maker of the Brescian School, studied with Ruggieri, and sometimes made instruments under his own name. Or this entry, in an 1897 treatise I found by Charles Goffrey, The Violin and Its Condensed History, Perfection, and Famous Makers. Quote, Gaetano Pasta, Brescia, 1700. Good work. At least he got that. That entry was positively glowing compared to the next one in the book. Gaetano Antonino Cremona, 1860. Not in good proportions. Difficult to play in.
Try just start at opening Chacon.
Opening of Chacon? Alright. So on lieu of too much actual information on Pasta, I decided to touch on a smaller topic. What exactly is the Brescian School? Well, this goes hand in hand with the Cremonese school, which we are abundantly familiar with thanks to the Amati family, the Stradivari family, the Ruggieri family, the Guarneri family. You get the drift. The basis of these two schools is obviously their cities, Cremona and Brescia. If we look at them in historical terms, they're both smaller cities outside of the much larger city of Milan. Milan was a duchy in its own right and a major political and cultural center at that. It's currently the capital of the region of Lombardy, which is a large part of northern Italy. And historically, Lombardy was one of the richest areas in Italy from the 10th century onwards. Rich enough that from the 14th century, different countries like France and Austria waged serious wars to gain control of it. But anyway, you have these two really cultural satellite cities outside of Milan that were quite close together. Even in historical terms, they were close together. You could walk between them in 11 hours. The city of Brescia itself has an old history, first aligning itself with the Republic of Rome in 1 BC and later becoming part of the Venetian Republic. By the 15th century, Brescia had become known as the place to find viol and lute makers. It's said, in fact, that Isabella d'Este, one of the biggest Renaissance patronesses of music, went to Brescia to find luthiers, and that's part of what put the city on the map. It's quite interesting, actually. Brescia seems to be the first place we're finding slightly more recognizably modern instruments. Not quite violins yet, but the early luthiers in the 1500s were making a plethora of stringed instruments, lutes and viols and gambas. And these makers include Jacopo della Corna and Michele Zanetto, Battista Doneda, but it wasn't the custom at that point to really put identifying labels into the instruments. So a lot of these luthiers we know only from early texts and not necessarily from their instruments. The earliest surviving lute is from, we think, 1520, but again, having an accurate date is really difficult. But I do want to mention that there is a very cool text that I dug up on music and instrumentation from 1533. It's by Giovanni Maria Lanfranco called the Scintilla di Musica. It's really cool stuff. And obviously the Italian is way over my head, but just flipping through it is enough to make you marvel at what these old masters were capable of making. Quite nice.
Yeah, it is.
I really quite like it. Pasta, everybody. Think Gaetano Pasta. I think we should be checking him out. This is a really, really nice tone. I really like it.
And it's like the easiest name to remember.
Yeah. The earliest mention of a violin being made was with Andrea Amati in 1550, but this was in Cremona. And even as the Brescian School continued on into the 1700s, that first step by Amati helped bring the spotlight on violin making into Cremona and begin its move away from Brescia. So, I've digressed from the instrument at hand, the pasta, but I do hope this really helps fill in some gaps on the history of the Brescian School and what that even really means. On this channel, I've been lucky enough to play the work of some of the greatest, most well-known makers, Stradivari, Guarneri, Guadagnini, and the like. And sometimes they're fantastic instruments, sometimes they don't speak to me as much, but something that warrants mentioning is that there are so many good instruments out there. It doesn't have to be a Strad. We've been harping on about Strads nonstop for literally 4 centuries. Literally. Strads have never gone out of style, and they're clearly incredible instruments. So maybe we can take the time to examine less well-known makers and see what they have to offer. I've been consistently and honestly delighted with instruments like this Pasta. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, give us a like, subscribe, leave us a comment below, and until next time, cheers!